and companies of different vehicles, because things like tanks really only function well if you have a company of them, right? And then if you want a supplementary group of vehicles, you really want those to really be able to work in platoons, right? So at least 4 vehicles per platoon. 3 if you're weirdo Russians, but
Yeah, that's fair.
you want like 3 independent maneuver elements for each one of these things, or else you can't really like do much. That way you could get like, your 4 ASF, 4 tanks. I mean, or like a couple, like 2 AAs and then battle armor. Be cool.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the main constraint of tanks in this game is just their ability to engage targets simultaneously. It can be a little challenging versus mechs.
Oh, I don't like this new microphone. We
What
can
do you
hear,
mean engage targets simultaneously?
like, if every tank column I've ever seen in like the Dire March stuff has always failed because since pretty much all the tanks are like the same turret level, if you get a bunch of them together, they tend to shoot each other more than shooting the enemy, especially if they like walk in front of each other on accident.
Also, lack of maneuverability, lack of able to really hide valuable components that they don't want to be shot off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a function of like the design of the tanks one and the crews operating them. Because I mean, in order to like use multiple tanks, you need to have very disciplined formations. And if you don't have those formations and terrain permissible for them, it's just not going to work, right?
Yeah.
And those formations are something that have to be like trained. We do that in CC, or like the armor version of CC, where we've done up to like 12 of them at once. And it's quite a bit of work because wedges and lines and columns are like difficult to like transition between.
Yeah, especially over rough terrain, it can be really brutal.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a ballet dance, right? And if you have to have like a person who like knows, you have to have everybody knows what like wedge formation is, right? Because your column convoy is typically, right, if you're traveling like in a straight line in a column, you're going to be 2, 1, 3, 4, right? So every tank has a number and a position. And, if you call like wedge, the second vehicle, well, the lead vehicle goes off to the left, the vehicle in front goes forward, and then the 2 to the back go to the right side of the formation, right? And you have to like practice that in order to get that to work right. But in a mech, everybody just kind of stomps off to the side, and then it doesn't really matter. Right? You don't have to worry about it as much.
And you can shoot over your buddy if he's shorter than you, which is even better.
Yeah, so there's a lot more stuff that you can do to really like get away with it because the mechs are all different sizes, but in tanks you don't have that. I think it would be really cool to see tanks like... I really enjoyed even fighting the triple UAC Morrigu, right? The UAC 10 Morrigu, right? Because yeah, but the thing is, that's what a tank should be, right? That's how a tank should work, especially in a universe like BattleTech, right? Where it's one gun, it drives at you in a straight line, and it's got a shit ton of armor in the front, and it's got the gun, and it shoots at you. That's it, right? That's what tanks do. And I don't know why, like, so many people complained about the thing, like, being, like...
Because it's non-interactive and bullshit.
What do you mean non-interactive?
It's not interactive to turn a corner into a triple UAC 10 Morrigu and go, my mech is gone.
I mean, I think
with the added benefit that it was, because UAC 10 is strictly, like, one of, if not the best gun in the game. Especially when you have 2 and 3 of it.
Yeah, and I don't like the fact that the thing was nerfed because it was a good idea. And the thing that you're mentioning with, like, turning a corner and, like, being at a severe disadvantage to a vehicle like that is a problem that real tanks have, right? And I think that's a good thing. I think that, like...
But, again, this is a video game, and if you want to put real-world things into it, mechs shouldn't function to begin with. Also, it is a mech warrior game. The main appeal is mechs.
Well, I mean, we're in... Then why do we even have ASF and battle armor in the game in the first place?
Because they wanted to have supplementary things that you could also play to give more scenarios and different things to do.
The
Right, but
problem
that's not what
with
the meta is saying.
the problem with the triple UAC 10 Morrigu wasn't that it was a good idea, it's that it was too dominant of a Morrigu. There was effectively no reason to take any of the other Morrigus when it was around. That's inherently a problem in a game like this where there's so many different variants. Having one that's just objectively the best one is an issue. Changing it was a good idea, even if it was like an optimized variant, because it made all the other ones effectively worthless.
Right, and I
Also,
think that
it's
the answer to
supposed to
that,
being the quote placeholder assault tank while being super cheap and low brain usage was not interesting.
right, and I think that the main thing with it is that the other Morgus should have been made better to fill other niches. And if, we're having a problem with tactics like, hey, this thing is really good at like sitting in a spot and defending, then we need to have some kind of answer within this like combined arms tool belt that is really good at dislodging these kinds of vehicles.
Oh yeah.
Right, and for me, I really like the fact that this thing eats bombs and gets melted. Right, if I see like a Marigo on the ground, it's like, oh, bring in your planes and like turn that thing into mulch. Right, that's exactly what a plane should do. Or, use your battle armor, and then battle armor could have very specific weapons that would be able to turn that thing to mulch, which is actually like an inspiration of the real life tactic. Right, if you had a tank around a corner in like an urban environment like that, your best bet to dislodge that would be planes, artillery, infantry, right? Rather than
Except
sending
for
your tanks
the
around
the
the
thing
corner.
with the UAC-10 Morrigu is that it's a Morrigu, so it has good turret traverse, so it can actually aim up pretty well, and it's also got UAC-10s, so it absolutely melts anything that comes into its line of fire.
Right, but I mean, Blake and I have had really good success in deleting those things with the tandem bombing runs we did.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
very good success.
Yeah, I mean, ASF versus tank, you'd see usually the ASF winning then.
Yeah, that's what I mean, and I think that that's a really good combined arms for, solution to tanks in defensive configurations, where the tanks are vulnerable to certain weapons, where the mechs can't just do everything because, lol, it's a mech warrior game. Right now, you need to apply your combined arms thinking
We got
to
an
these
assault.
battle spaces.
Eve is in a blood-ass Kaze, if we can pivot.
Yeah. I think that just saying, oh, it's a mech warrior game, the appeal is mechs, it's like, well, we have this combined arms environment, and, these things should excel
Oh,
in
I'm
different
stuck.
positions. But,
Then
it's just a theory.
lampposted.
Alright, he's down. Let's get this goblin. I think the other unfortunate thing is, maybe on its own it's a fine asset, but a lot of, public players have a hard time countering that. So, like, ASF pilots that are decent are few and far between, as you probably know. So it's it's hard to pull the right counter, right? Where sometimes no one has the skill set for that counter on a public game, so it can be very difficult to, make it a fun experience to fight the thing.
Yeah, and I think the solution to that is diversify the number of counters, right? So, if mechs are having a really hard time because they're super mobile and they're jack of all trades, when you don't have good ASF pilots, I think, a battle armor counter would be great. And I think the recoilless rifle, grenade launcher, SRM changes that were made were a really good answer to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Especially with how we increase the ability to spawn BA at the front. And I think doing that and making more logistical options to transport, move, and deploy BA would be way better than just like, nerfing the thing because it's too good. Right? I
Yeah.
like having assets that delete things. I like fighting the Morgu. It was really cool to turn the corner and be like, oh shit, it's that thing.
Well, there's kind of a thought about there's definitely been a thought about adding like BA seats to a lot of to some assets. I don't know if it's available or not, but it allow, let's say, a mech or a tank to take BA into battle
Yeah,
as a seat rather than just trying to balance on there and falling off.
Yeah, I think that would increase the number of things in the game that can cause these interactions. And I always think that the option of, hey, this thing doesn't have any answers, is better solved by improving the vehicles that it's interacting with rather than just flat out nerfing the thing. Like, give something else an answer to this kind of thing, at least in the combined arms experience, right?
Yeah, true. Although, And Vic has many difficult balancing decisions to make, to be honest. I don't envy his position.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, it's not game changing. And I think it still has 2 UAC2s, right?
I haven't
What
looked at it
does?
recently.
I don't
UAC10s.
think there's a Margo with UAC 10s anymore.
No,
That
there
sucks.
isn't.
That
There's
sucks.
the new dual Hag 20 Morgu.
Which is incredibly good. There's also, what, 3 UAC 5? 3 UAC 5 one, I think? That one is pretty brutally effective.
All right, so it does half the damage, I guess.
Well, it has a better refire rate, better heat management. And it has supplemental weapons on it as well.
Doesn't automatically delete anything less than 100-ton mechs that turn the corner into it.
Better range too, which is nice.
I mean, get some recon assets. Make sure you check around the corner.
No,
Don't
but
walk around.
the literal problem is that there's ways to make it so that you cannot have radar signatures on things. If you take that Margo and you stick it under an AECM field and have it go radar passive, you can't see it.
Well, I mean,
Period.
you just got ambushed. That's a really good ambush, and those guys should absolutely fuck you if you come around the corner into that. I don't, I mean,
Are you trying to leg me, Eve? Are you legging me, Eve?
No,
I don't appreciate it.
I can
if I come
only
around
see
a
your
corner to
lower
like
half.
ECM tank,
That's
or
all you
like
did
an
on the last
ECM
run.
tank combo around the corner. I'm just like, oh well, that sounds like a prepared position to me, and I should absolutely die to that.
Yeah, but there is a difference between, oh, I should lose to that, and wow, I peaked for half a second and my entire mech's gone. Triple UAC 10 was a mistake.
Got a blood ass.
Even if it was on a mech, it'd be a mistake. Because
Yeah.
it's too much damage with no downsides. It doesn't generate a ton of heat. It's got good range for what it does. Like, it's pinpoint accurate damage.
Let's get this oil. Should be able to delete. We got 2 assaults up front. And a Morgu. So we got a Cody.
There's a second tank coming up behind.
Alright, let's focus Kel.
That's true. I think the arguments for it's like, oh, it fires too much, it has too much damage versus what it is. I think that's fair. Maybe like artificial cost inflation or something like that. I think that's kind of a problem with the hardpoint system, is that in the universe more vehicles would be designed with the UAC-10.
Oh boy, I'm getting toasty here. I gotta pull back. That seems like our other lance.
Slow.
Yeah, our other lance is moving up on it.
But I mean, have another mech that like just.
Ooh. Blood Raven popped me.
Yeah, I think a reconnaissance asset would be the solution there, but we haven't really fostered that kind of gameplay in the community, really.
That's basically what the Hephaestus is, or anything with C3.
Yeah, or like anything that's just fast that can get around the corner first, or like a BA or a plane.
But
or
anything
something
fast
and
gets
tell you
around the
what it is.
corner, and it's so undertunned that the triple UAC 10 hits it once and it dies.
Well, then I guess you should use a different kind of reconnaissance asset for the corner peeking then. Right?
But
Maybe
like,
something
it's
that
not
would
even
flo-
like limited to strictly corners. There's a UAC 10 Morgu placed anywhere is a 650 meter depth zone for basically anything that isn't top downing it. And top downing it shouldn't be top downing shouldn't be the answer to something, because top downing is also counterintuitive and not fun to deal with.
for the thing being targeted.
Yeah. Because the only counterplay to being top down is to basically be a rifleman that can aim straight up, or I think the Shodan can as well.
Partisan
But,
can do it, and Hewitt can do it.
I don't think the Hewitt can.
Hewitt can aim straight up, and so can the Partisan. I know that for a
I don't think
fact.
the Partisan can.
It can. That's why it's so good at killing ballooning
But, like,
VTOLs.
Even
But
then,
top downing should not be the prerequisite strategy to kill anything in the game.
here's the thing. You shouldn't use one bullshit mechanic to beat another bullshit mechanic. That shouldn't be a necessary thing to do. There should be both of those mechanics shouldn't exist in the first place. You shouldn't have a tank that is, or any asset in the game that single-handedly can park itself anywhere or move around and be anything walks up to me, and if it doesn't overwhelm me by being 3 to 4 times my strength in total, just loses automatically. That's what the UX.
How much does the Moragu weigh?
80
was
tons.
80-ton tank.
Because the thing is, my counter to that is if I saw Moragu as an open field, right, as like a Timberwolf Prime, which I think is reasonable, which isn't close to the same bracket, it's got a similar weight, right? I've got dual ER large. I've got
Yeah, but then that's just the Moragu positioning poorly for you to be able to keep it at range. Moragu
Well, I mean,
should
who's
never
to-
be out in the open, and that's just actually no one should ever really be out in the open because you need cover. That's just a part of the game. But the thing
But I mean,
is
yeah,
that
but what if we're playing on a map like Harvest, right, where there's no
then
choice?
you're taking the UX10 Moragu to begin with because or you're sitting in the base and waiting for people to come at you.
Right,
Or it's just going to
and-
drive across the field and get into the other city and then be in your factory. If it's
Right,
sitting out in
and-
the field, then it's making a mistake of you're playing on Harvest, sight lines are 2 kilometers. you
Right. So
fucked
I mean,
up.
it's limited here, and I think that those limitations are pretty reasonable, right?
But
Because,
not every
again,
map is Harvest.
Well, we've also
There's-
got Tukiyid.
There's
and-
always going to be.
Tukayed also has tons of cover, actually. It's got so many
Yeah.
hills on it.
There's always
there's
going to be
hills.
there's always going to be a situation where any given asset isn't going to be great or is going to be absolutely fantastic. The problem with the UX10 Morgu is it was so good a generalist. It was good in too many situations. You would have to take something that was significantly stronger than it to even have a chance of 1v1ing it and winning in a fight, or several things that are equal in power, like lower power to even
The
have
only
a chance
things
of
in the
winning against
game,
it.
the only other assets in the game that could viably 1v1 a UX10 Morgu was a Dolt Daishi and the makeshift Dolt Atlas.
or something that just outranged it, right?
But the problem is that 90% of scenarios, you're not going to be able to just outrange it.
Yeah, and that was I guess for me that's really the problem that I have with a lot of the maps in the game is that we're kind of forcing these very shoeboxy unga fights, right? The maps that I generally tend to prefer, like Frostbite or
Because the game is terrain control, though. You need to be holding cap zones. And if you have
Right.
cap zones that are just out in the open doing nothing, the
I'll
team
be
to cap
right
it
back,
first
guys,
basically
for
gets to
some
hold it the whole game.
Oasis.
right, but we've also got like Warzone or Tukayid or
Yeah, but 2K has tons of cover and still forces
Warzone-
people to brawl most of the time. Warzone is a map that generally the entire community hates
Yeah, Warzone's
because it's
fucking
massive
terrible.
and super boring and turns into arrows, and the only things that are actually doing anything are ASF at that point because the map's so large.
What the fuck?
And I
thought
think
it's
that it's just because a lot of people really don't want to maneuver.
No, it's because people don't want to play on large open maps that are super boring
I mean,
or be
They don't
shot
have-
by non-interactive things.
right, I think the main reason they're boring is because there's so much negative feedback that people just don't want to maneuver.
But there's no maneuvering to do on Warzone. There's one hill and it's a massive open map.
Yeah, bomb the hill, shoot artillery at it, flank it, right?
But
Arty
the
the
hill's
hill.
in the center of the map.
Yeah, arty it.
Okay, you arty it. It's not even like a viable place for you to control because it's not a cap zone.
Right, so it's key. It's not the objective, but it's key terrain. So arty it.
Okay, you've artied it. Now what? You're gonna sit on the hill and proceed to shoot into an open field still? The map
Well,
is
I
just
mean, no.
boring. There's nothing going on it.
Well, no, there's nobody on the hill because I'm artying it. Or I occupy the hill with my own units to allow another unit to go down and then cap the flag because there's no Overwatch now. Or I control the Overwatch.
Yeah, but then you get artied. And then it's just
Yes.
that over and over, and it's
then I
non-interactive.
can't- So I abandon the hill because I'm getting artied, and now I have to engage in a brawl over the objective zone because no one can reliably Overwatch.
But
'cause
the
it's being
objective zone's
contested by
just gonna get
arty.
LT'd as well. Because
Well,
the
then why
map's
do we-
that big, you can't counterplay the LT reliably.
So arty the LT. So bomb the
You
LT with a
can't.
plane.
You
Bomb
can't.
it with a plane.
You literally can't.
yeah,
Why can't I
people
bomb it with a plane?
because they're sitting
because
right
it's
outside of
sitting
their main.
inside of its factory.
Pretty much.
Oh, so
Yeah.
the map needs to be bigger.
No, the map being bigger doesn't solve that. All that does
Or-
is go, wow, it's gonna take me 20 minutes to walk across the map, even in a masked Blanner.
Or make it so that the LT doesn't have an area with top cover, so that you can't, it can't protect itself from being bombed.
but it's going to be protected anyway because it's so far back.
But I'm in a
And
plane.
at
I
any
don't
point
give a
in
shit.
time, it can go and hide.
Yeah, but I'm a plane. I don't give a shit.
You are
I
going to
got my
give a
wingman-
shit when there's a partisan or a sparrowhawk standing there waiting for you to try to bomb it.
Bring more
Or
planes.
the long tom is just sitting
If
right
your
next to
option to
main.
beat the LT is to throw 3+ planes on it, the LT
mean,
has
well-
already beat you.
But the thing is, I have an LT also, so the enemy also needs to throw planes.
What
And
was
the
the
enemy,
last
in order.
map?
But the thing is,
Buzzards.
it's not the LT.
You've
that
already
needs-
lost by putting 3 guys into planes because
But
you have
the
no
enemy
tonnage
has
on the
also
ground to be
put-
able to hold things.
But the enemy has also put multiple people into planes.
No
it
one
needs
should be
2
putting
Sparrowhawks
multiple
to
people
kill
to
me.
planes. You should not be playing Warzone because Warzone's a
mean-
shit map.
But this is the problem. But I think that the argument here is that I'm saying, well, we need to have these mechs fight and they can control these dominant zones. I'm like, okay, well, already the dominant zones, right? Already these key positions.
But then no one's going to be
And you're
fighting
saying-
there because
because they're going to
you're
get
just
already.
not going to stand there.
Right, because
And then
you're
the
gonna get
map
already.
becomes people standing around doing nothing because you can't do anything. The
I mean-
only zone to cap is in the center of the map, and it's being
But if
shelled
you-
by 2 LTs.
But if you neutralize the contesting arty or the forward observers, right, with planes or direct fire from mechs or maybe counter battery artillery, right, you
You
can
don't need
open
forward
that spot up
observers for
again.
LT though. They just stand there and hit M1.
Guys,
over and over.
hey, for a second, this conversation's absolutely going nowhere. You guys have been arguing over the same points over and over again for like 20 minutes. This argument.
No, we haven't.
Yes,
Not
you
at
The
all.
have.
problem is
You
that
really
maps like
have
Warzone
been. This argument's going
are
nowhere.
just non-interactive.
This
There's
argument's
nothing
going
on of
absolutely
interest.
nowhere.
I mean, I don't think.
I
that's
think
the
you guys
case.
both have deeper points to make about this map, but you're not articulating it because someone will say something, and then Judah says something, Kaze says, well, what about this? And then Judah says something, Kaze says, what about this? And it's just going back and forth, and you eventually loop back to the same situation over and over and over again.
I mean,
and
I
this has
think
been
that's-
happening for
that's
like
kind of how the
10, 15 minutes.
I think that's kind of like how the conversation. I'm not upset with Kaze at all. I think his points are valid.
it's
I don't
just
know if he's upset with me.
I'm not upset
Am I
with you. It's
ignoring-
just like the problem is just maps like Warzone are not interactive. They're not fun. There's nothing of actual interest going on because there's so little cover or things to deal with that if the option is throw LTs at it, you're doing nothing. You're staring at a small radar signature and not even actually at signatures at that point because you're just shelling a zone and waiting for it to land.
I think that the difference between our perspective here is that you're interested more in what the individual player is doing, and I'm interested more in how the entirety of the teams are moving as a collective. And your perspective is, well, having an LT sit there and shell things is boring and not interactive. And, I
But the
say
thing
that.
is that as soon as an LT is on the field and it's shelling a spot, neither team can utilize that spot.
Yes.
Because as soon as your team tries to move in, either the LT is now 98,000 C-bills of uselessness because it can't shell the spot it needs to be shelling, or it's hitting its teammates.
Right. And I think that deterrence, right, the existence of an object threatening something,
this is really
in of
fucking
itself
boring, guys.
an interesting
I don't
mechanic.
know what's going on.
But the option shouldn't be, the solution to a map shouldn't be LT it. And then throw 3 planes at the LT to deal with it.
And that right there is the difference in perspective in us, because I think, right, you say that this needs to be like a concentrated brawl where the main interaction is mech.
It doesn't
shooting
need to
at
be
the mechs and the
a
players.
concentrated brawl, but what it needs to have is interactivity going on in the map that allows people to deal with a thing in an interactive way and not, oh, they
I don't
have an
really know
LT that we can't
I don't really
deal
know what
with.
you mean by interactive.
Interactive in the sense that what I'm doing to counter it can actually be dealt with in a not annoying and bullshit way.
Right. I don't really know what you mean by annoying and bullshit. All right.
Look at old toasty there, Eve.
Maybe I'm playing too much.
I
Diablo.
fucking crashed anyway.
It's okay to disagree on how it should look.
No, I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that he's
Okay. So the problem is that specifically in Living Legends, team
Here
coordination
we
doesn't
go
really come down
again.
to, like, oh, shell it and then move in and do all that, because the way the game functions is a lot of dispersed
I'm gonna
shitty
turn.
fights. And that's how it's always going to be,
I'm gonna
because people
turn
don't want to coordinate.
Discord down so that
And that's just a problem of
the rest of this
public
video isn't
games
just
and random players.
these
Now, if you're
guys
playing on
arguing.
a competitive match where
Should
you
do
have,
that.
say, all of CJS versus all of another clan, then that scenario makes a little more sense, but you're still having to use bullshit things to deal with something that is, in and of itself, generally non-interactive.
See, I disagree with you because I've played Project Reality, and which is another, large-scale combined arms mod, and Squad, which is its spiritual successor, and I've seen, incredible levels of teamwork from greater numbers of players in public environments.
Okay, but in those, you also have access to easily accessible voice controls and also people coordinating groups of people.
Oh my god.
Yeah, well, the developers for Project Reality built those for the mod built those voice controls in the game.
Yeah,
This
we don't
is-
have access to that.
Good
I mean, you
argumentation.
could.
In the
solutions
current
are
state
there.
of living, no, in the current state of Living Legends, it's
No, it's very, very possible to implement. There's definitely open source voice frameworks that can implement this into this game. It's just that we don't want you. But the thing is, again, you don't actually even need that degree of voice control in order to make that work, right? You don't have to have, right, the command net in order to make that work. And I think the other difference here in our opinions is that I think that artillery is a valid and necessary component of the combined arms team that should be there pretty much all the time in some kind of capacity. I think there is no force that is complete that doesn't include some kind of consideration for artillery at the company level, which is what Living Legends is, right, trying to simulate, right? It's like 2 companies of units. And I think that there should always be some consideration for artillery, right, with your vehicle force, right? And then planes should be supplementary. Huh?
Yeah, and there's a lot of good options for artillery as well. I mean, I think the arrow changes are pretty good in that regard, right? Like
Yeah.
destroying. I don't know if you know, but they destroy narcs now.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's a bit there's a bit of a downside to using them now, and laser guide bombs also into it, and they do destroy arms as well. So you can't just get
Yeah.
repeatedly ganked in the same way.
Yeah, and I think that that's a valid nerf, and because of course none of those tag lasers don't care about either of those things.
Yeah,
right?
tag remains unchanged, right?
Yeah, and I think that that is like a really, really good implementation, and that, buffing this thing that allows you to get access to the withering indirect fire is a super valid thing, right? Because of course that forces communication,
Because our
but it gives, or it forces
yeah, I don't know what to say
integration, but it
about
also
this.
forces the team,
I don't know.
to one, respond to it by shooting at the forward observer, protecting their forward observer, but also getting a bonus from, implementing this stuff, more DPS and different capabilities.
Yeah, the other well, and if you want to keep narking, basically it's a narc per volley. So
Or just use
I
LRMs,
popped my heat
right?
sinks.
Or just use LRMs, which is totally also a valid idea, right?
yeah, those work really well. Overall, I don't know if you play with extra range ATMs. They've been buffed pretty well.
Nice. Yeah,
Like,
I
they have
think
a
I
chord
really
trajectory, so they don't clip into terrain.
clip everything now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think no, I'll try those out. I haven't been there since I did that, but like for me, like artillery is like it's not a question. It's in every kind of open field engagement of the size, there should be some form of indirect fires, or else your combined arms team is incomplete and you deserve to get clapped, flat out.
Yeah, and that does tend to happen to the teams without indirect fire assets. That's for sure.
And I think that's a good thing. I think you should absolutely get punished for not implementing the combined arms team, and that things should just die for not being supported properly, right?
Oh yeah, and of course, you've probably seen it before. The YOLO mechs and the solo assaults and the solo heavies. They just get deleted. At the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, I think one of the vulnerabilities to artillery is this twofold thing where you can knock out this forward observer, you can knock out the C3 asset, you can bomb the artillery, But the thing is that the tank and the infantry should be terrified of the artillery, right? They should be terrified of it. That's their like primary, non-tank counter.
Yeah.
Is, in real life it's like the DPICM or, the missile and stuff like that. But the tanks are the primary focus for actually taking ground. But, that's. I always like to see things get more towards the combined arms because then the terrain considerations become less important and it becomes more about